The Roman Colosseum is not a ruin. It is a testament to the greatest engineering flaw and the most massive act of plunder in history. You look at the thousands of holes and think, are these the marks of war? Cannonballs? No. They are scars left by chisels, used to carve out 300 tons of structural iron while the building was still intact. Why does one wall stand like a monolith while the other has crumbled to dust? The answer isn't in battles. It's in the 40 feet of soft clay beneath the southern foundation. We are told a story of greatness and decline. I will tell you the story of a time bomb planted on the first day of construction, and where half of the building truly disappeared. Spoiler alert, it's currently in the foundations of the Vatican. It all began with a single, fatal mistake. A mistake that could no longer be corrected. The year is 70 AD. Emperor Vespasian decides to build the greatest amphitheater in history. The site is chosen, the bottom of a drained lake, where the artificial pond of Nero's Golden House once stood. And this is the first step toward collapse. Imagine the construction site. On one side, workers are biting into the dense, monolithic tuff of the Valian Hill. The sound is sharp, dry. The stone resists. On the other side, they are digging into viscous, damp clay, the former lakebed. The smell of silt, the squelch of mud underfoot. Two different worlds on a single site. And this is where the real problem begins. The northern part of the Colosseum stands on solid rock. The southern part rests on a 40-foot layer of soft, unstable sediment. The total weight of the structure is 500,000 tons. Half of that weight presses on stone, while the other half presses on a wet sponge. This isn't construction. It's a death sentence. What happens during an earthquake? The northern section, anchored to the rock, jolts as a single unit. The southern section, on soft ground, begins to vibrate with a different amplitude. It is literally shaken back and forth. The building is doomed to crack right along the geological fault line. But even this mine might not have detonated for centuries, if its skeleton had not been carved out from within. The outer walls of the Colosseum are not monolithic. Forget that image. It is a gigantic construction set of thousands of travertine blocks fitted together. There is not an ounce of cement between them. Stop. Then what holds together a wall 160 feet high and a third of a mile long? What prevents it from collapsing under its own weight? The answer is iron, an internal skeleton of metal clamps. Imagine U-shaped pins of wrought iron, each weighing about 11 pounds. They were hammered into slots carved into adjacent blocks and sealed with lead. These clamps stitched the structure together, preventing it from breathing and separating at the seams. In total, about 300 tons of iron were used for this skeleton. Now, look at the Colosseum again, at the thousands of pockmarks that cover it. It seems insane until you see the numbers. I too once thought they were marks from cannonballs. It's a compelling story, but the evidence debunks it. The Middle Ages. Rome is in decline. Stone is worthless. It's everywhere. But metal is currency. It's weapons, tools, nails. A rumor spreads through the city. Hundreds of tons of high-quality iron are hidden within the walls of the old amphitheater. And so, industrial-scale extraction begins. Imagine a man with a long chisel and a hammer. Day after day, he methodically drills through 20 inches of stone to reach a piece of metal. The screech of iron on stone. Dust. This was repeated tens of thousands of times across the entire facade. This wasn't the work of lone vandals. These were organized crews working systematically for years. Each extracted pin was a vertebra ripped from the building's spine. The 1,700-foot stone ring lost its rigidity. It began to sag and crack under its own weight, transforming into a giant horseshoe. The building was dying from within. Now we have two parts of the equation, a crack in the foundation and a skeleton that has been carved out. All that's left is to wait for the trigger. For years, the weakened building creaked and sagged, but it stood. It was like a patient given a terminal diagnosis, simply waiting for the final, decisive blow that would break its back for good. And that blow comes. September 9th, 1349. A catastrophic earthquake strikes central Italy. The tremors are so powerful they are described across Europe. The poet Petrarch, who witnessed the aftermath, wrote of the unbelievable ruin of Rome. The city shook for several days. Now picture the scene. Night. The silence is shattered by a low, subterranean rumble that grows with each second. The northern wall, clinging to the bedrock, jolts as one. But the southern part? The southern part, standing on 40 feet of wet clay and stripped of its iron ties, begins to sway violently. Stone blocks weighing several tons grind against each other. The sound of cracking stone is like the crunch of breaking bones. The roar of falling blocks. A wall 160 feet high collapses like a house of cards. But it doesn't just fall. It breaks away along a perfect line, exactly where the monolithic tuff of the hill transitions to the soft lake deposits. The fracture follows the geological boundary with mathematical precision. The geological time bomb, planted 13 centuries earlier, had exploded. Hundreds of thousands of tons of prime travertine, already processed, cut, and ready for use, now lie in a giant heap in the center of the city. The Colosseum ceased to be a building. That night, it became the world's largest free quarry. They will tell you the Colosseum suffered from the ravages of time. That is a lie. It was dismantled. Officially, methodically, with the permission of the popes of Rome. What began as looting became state policy, an industrial demolition. These were not gangs with hammers. This was an industry. The stone blocks that fell after the earthquake were inspected, numbered on site, and then loaded onto ox-drawn carts. They were hauled away to build the new Christian Rome. We have the documents, dozens of them, recording this process with accounting precision. Let's do the math. In 1455, 2,500 cartloads of travertine were taken from the Colosseum to build the Palazzo Venezia. This isn't an estimate, it's an entry in the construction budget. 2,500 documented trips, the 16th century. Stones from the Colosseum are used for the facade of St. Peter's Basilica and the Palazzo Farnese. The greatest symbol of the pagan empire became building material for its ideological successor. Its bones were used for the foundation of a new faith. And these are just the major projects. One documented case shows 40 cartloads of pure white marble, which once adorned statues and seats, being removed in a single trip to build a private fountain. Think about that. The missing half of the Colosseum didn't just vanish. It didn't evaporate. It dissolved into the walls of the modern city, becoming part of its DNA. You walk through Rome and literally touch fragments of the amphitheater without even knowing it. But while this legalized plunder was happening above, a technology 1.5 millennia ahead of its time was rotting away below the arena. Above, the roar of 50,000 spectators, hot sand, and blood. Below, under the wooden floor of the arena, absolute darkness, the creak of machinery, and the smell of sweat and fear. This is the Hypogeum, a 2-story underground labyrinth covering over 32,000 square feet, the nerve center of the Colosseum. And here operated a machine the world would not see the equal of for another 1,500 years. Imagine it. 224 men, 8 to a mechanism, stand in complete darkness. Their world is the groan of taut ropes on giant wooden capstans and the sharp commands of an overseer. They don't see the arena. They don't hear the crowd. They only hear the rhythm they are given. Their job is to turn, simultaneously, flawlessly. This was a system of 28 wooden elevators. On a single signal, 224 slaves set the entire machine in motion, and on the arena floor, as if by magic, 28 lions appear from 28 trapdoors. Or, in seconds, the scenery of a forest rises up. Or a gladiator emerges on a war chariot. To the 50,000 spectators above, it was magic, divine intervention. In reality, it was flawless mechanics and slave labor, a technology that European theaters would not replicate until the late 19th century. Stop. Let me repeat that. Until the 19th century. This machine was the heart of the Colosseum. It pumped blood and spectacle onto the arena. But when the empire fell, the heart stopped. The hypogeum was filled with trash, water, and mud, and into the empty, dying body of the building came entirely new residents. Forget the majestic ruins. Erase the postcard images of the setting sun filtering through the arches. For several centuries, the Colosseum became a slum. A giant, ugly, inhabited anthill. It began in the 12th century. The influential Frangipani family seized the amphitheater and turned it into a personal fortress, building their towers and fortifications into the ancient walls. They were the first to understand, this is not a monument, it is a resource, a ready-made citadel in the heart of the city. Then, it got worse. When the Frangipani's power waned, the Colosseum was colonized. The empty 130-foot arches of the outer wall were filled in with brick and rubble. Inside, crude wooden floors were added to create 2- and 3-story apartments. New windows and doors were knocked through the 10-foot thick ancient walls, which were designed to bear colossal loads. Imagine the absurdity. Instead of the roar of the crowd, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer from a workshop set up in a former imperial passageway. Instead of the smell of blood and wild beasts, the smoke from a hearth and the scent of stew. Laundry hung to dry between columns that had witnessed triumphs and slaughter. The arena, the very same arena soaked in the blood of tens of thousands of gladiators and animals, was covered with a thick layer of earth, and on it, a huge vegetable garden was planted. Cabbage and beans grew there. You might say, people survived as best they could. Yes, but this reveals something far worse. It demonstrates a complete, total collapse of cultural memory. To the medieval person, this was not a monument to a great empire. It was just a cliff with convenient caves. A pre-built housing complex that could be rented out or settled by the poor. No reverence, no history, just stone. Ovens were built into the walls. Chimneys, punched right through the Roman concrete, became permanently embedded in the structure, saturating it with soot for centuries. The building wasn't just used. It was digested. This wasn't life among the ruins. It was the colonization of a great empire's corpse. And now, having traced the entire path, from the geological mine in the foundation to the vegetable gardens on the arena, we can put all the pieces together. We can assemble the protocol of this murder. And the picture is grim. Let's assemble this protocol of collapse into a single chain. No emotion, just facts. Step 1. The fatal geological error. The sentence was passed before the first stone was laid. Half of the building stands on monolithic rock. The other half rests on 40 feet of damp, unstable clay, a former lake bed. This wasn't a miscalculation. It was a time bomb built into the design, a ticking bomb. Step 2. Systematic plunder. Over decades, 300 tons of iron clamps are methodically cut out of the building, its internal skeleton. Each removed clamp is a torn-out vertebra. The structure loses its rigidity. It is no longer a monolith. It is a collection of stone blocks, simply stacked on top of each other, ready to crumble. The building is weakened to its limit. Step 3. The earthquake of 1349. The perfect catalyst. A trigger pulled by nature. The northern wall, on rock, holds. The southern wall, weakened, without its clamps, standing on a clay sponge, vibrates to the point of total collapse. The fracture occurs with mathematical precision, right along the boundary of the geological strata. The geological mine has detonated. Step 4. Industrial demolition. Hundreds of thousands of tons of prime travertine now lie on the ground, a ready-made quarry. And the popes of Rome legalize its disassembly. This isn't vandalism, it's state policy. The stones of the Colosseum become the foundation for St. Peter's Basilica, for the palaces of the new power. The Colosseum doesn't die, it is devoured. Put these 4 steps together. This is not a story of decline caused by time and barbarians. It is a story of a predictable, cold-blooded murder, followed by cannibalism. And the official version, the one you hear in guidebooks, is silent about this. The question is, why? I understand why the version of greatness and natural decline is so appealing. It's beautiful, convenient, and simple. And that's precisely why it's so easily repeated in every guidebook, in every documentary. It doesn't require you to think. It just requires you to nod. And that is precisely why this version is so dangerous, because it sounds convincing. Then you start looking at the details, and it becomes unsettling. You're not just looking at stone. You're looking at a geological map of Rome, and you see the fault line running directly under the southern wall. You look at the construction budgets for the Palazzo Farnese, and you see records for the removal of 2,500 cartloads of travertine from the Colosseum. You see the chisel marks where 600-pound blocks were pried out. Because right here, in these documents and maps, the beautiful version shatters. It doesn't stand up to the scrutiny of physics, of logistics, of things. The official story is just another version, and it's defended because it doesn't require rewriting hundreds of books and thousands of dissertations. It doesn't force the admission that the empire's greatest monument is also a monument to a colossal engineering blunder and state-sponsored cannibalism. To admit this is to ask one uncomfortable question. If this is how they treated the main symbol of Rome, its calling card, what happened to the thousands of other, less significant sites? The forums, basilicas, aqueducts. To admit the truth about the Colosseum is to admit that we are not looking at ruins left by barbarians. We are looking at the gutted remains that one civilization dismantled for the building materials of the next. This isn't decline, it's a system. I also used to think the holes in the walls were from cannonballs or siege engines. It's simpler, more dramatic. Until I saw the diagrams of those iron clamps and calculated the volume of stolen metal. The numbers don't lie. And they say this wasn't a war. It was an industrial extraction. Textbooks don't like to rewrite themselves, especially when it means admitting that history isn't a noble succession of eras, but a brutal process where the new devours the old. Literally, grinding its marble into lime and using its blocks for its own foundations. And what follows is what is usually left unsaid. Let's assemble this protocol of collapse into a single chain. No emotion, just facts. Step 1. A fatal geological error. Half of the 500,000-ton building stands on monolithic rock, the other on 40 feet of damp, unstable clay. A time bomb was planted on the first day of construction. The verdict was delivered before the first stone was laid. Step 2. Systematic plunder. 300 tons of iron clamps are methodically cut out from the outer walls, one by one. The building loses its internal skeleton, its structural frame. It begins to breathe, ready to crumble from any serious shock. Step 3. The earthquake of 1349. The perfect catalyst. The impact strikes the weakest point. The southern wall, standing on clay and stripped of its iron ties, breaks away along the geological fault line with mathematical precision. Step 4. Industrial demolition. The popes of Rome officially authorized the dismantling of the ruins for building materials for the new Christian Rome. The symbol of the pagan empire becomes a free quarry for its ideological successor. The pattern is obvious. We are not looking at stones. We are looking at a record of events. Geology, physics, archival documents, they all say the same thing. This is not a story about time and barbarians. It is a story of an engineering blunder and cynical, legalized cannibalism. At this point, the version of natural destruction over time ends. Period. It was convenient. It was beautiful. It allowed for selling tickets without asking uncomfortable questions. But here, it dies. Because this wasn't decline. It was a dismantling. Only half of the building survived. But it is these jagged wounds that tell the truth, the very truth so carefully hidden behind tourist tales of former glory. In the next 5 to 10 years, new non-destructive scanning technologies will allow us to precisely map the materials within the walls of old Rome. They will be able to literally highlight the stones from the Colosseum in the foundations of other buildings to trace this bloody trail of stolen history. What will this map reveal, and what will once again be left out of the frame? Save this video and go back to the timestamps with the numbers. Compare them with what the guides tell you. Write in the comments which fact shatters the convenient version the most. If you miss it, you'll lose the thread, and you'll have to piece the picture together again. The Colosseum proves a frightening truth. Civilizations do not disappear without a trace. They chew up their past, burn ancient marble into lime, and build the future from the fragments of forgotten greatness. And the most unsettling question is, if this happened to Rome, why do we think it will be any different for us?